I think we're going to get started. I wanted to welcome everybody. Thank you for attending the Zoom presentation on answers from admissions. Before we get started, Jackie and I wanted to let you know there are a lot of changes going in and around the college application process, and we've decided to do these Zoom presentations to keep you informed. We plan to have others in weeks to follow, so if you haven't already liked our Facebook page, if you can do that, we would appreciate it. And then when we're done with these individual videos, we are posting them to our Facebook page. And then we have also sent out the full video to everybody that was in attendance. So again, this is a good way for us to keep in touch. And I think it's a very valuable way of getting information out to these families that we're working with. Okay, now I want to introduce Jacob Westover. He is an assistant director of admissions at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. He has offered to spend some time with us to provide information on what changes are happening on college campuses. His focus obviously will be on the University of Kentucky, but the information will most likely be broadly applicable. Jacob has also agreed to participate in a question and answer session at the end of the presentation to answer any specific questions you might have. At that time, if you want to ask a specific question, just go ahead and press and hold down on your space bar, ask your question, and then release. If you feel more comfortable, you can also type a question into the chat and we'll ask the question for you. Okay, Jacob, thank you very much for taking the time to have this presentation. Jackie and I appreciate it very much. First off, can you tell our families a little bit about who you are, how long you've been affiliated with Kentucky, and what is your current position at the University of Kentucky?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, hi everyone, and thank you all so much for having me. Andrew and Jackie are a great resource for you all, so I highly encourage y'all to use them to your advantage. So like Andrew said, so my name is Jacob Westover. Most of you hopefully I've met at some point or you've gotten my communication, but I am one of our admissions counselors and recruiters here at UK. So a little bit about what we do. We are responsible for traveling and getting to obviously recruit students interested in coming to the University of Kentucky. So I specifically have the territory of Northern and Central Ohio, and within that primarily Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo, and the surrounding suburbs. And I've been in this role for, it'll be 3 years in May, which is pretty hard to believe, but time flies once you're graduated. But I've been in this role for 3 years. I've loved every minute of it. I love being able to work with you all more one-on-one. So as you all have questions, obviously never hesitate to reach out to me. I'm available through multiple different platforms. So whatever you all need, I'm happy to help.
Okay, good. Can you tell us a little bit about the changes that are going on at the University of Kentucky? Obviously, you know, front and center is COVID-19, but I'm kind of curious to start, I guess, with seniors, those that have applied and have been accepted to the University of Kentucky. I think you mentioned that the decision day has been extended from from May 1st to June 1st. Are there any other changes, again, specifically looking at the seniors that have, again, applied and have been accepted to the University of Kentucky?
Yeah, so yeah, as far as the biggest one, that would pretty much be it. So we have now officially moved our decision day from May 1st to June 1st. So students have another extra month to kind of prepare everything. That's really the biggest change with admitted students. Now we do have a couple additional new policies that we're undergoing right now. So for perhaps any new applicants that wanted to apply to the university, for as far as test scores, we are going to be test optional for those seniors that are wanting to apply. And also for the GPA, we're allowing seniors who are now applying to self-report, just for the time being, obviously with things being a little bit more difficult to access either your counselor, school administrator, things of that nature. And as far as some other big things, so when we're looking at our orientation, at this point, I can probably safely say that a lot of our summer orientations are now going to be held online. So our administration is currently working through what that's going to look like, and we're going to continue to send out further communication with students regarding that information. But I would probably just tell you all, if you're confirming at this point, that your orientation is probably going to be online. We've already done it in the past with some, but we are just again kind of going to revamp it and see what it's going to look like going into the summer.
Okay, good. What about financial aid packages? Students that have been accepted, by now they've already received financial aid packages. Are there any potential changes under the given circumstances that the financial aid department would take another look at their package? How would that work exactly?
Yeah, so from my understanding, when it comes to the finances side, most everything is going to stay the same. We do have the opportunity to perhaps award a few additional awards going through the remainder of the spring semester. I personally am not going to know what those look like. It could be a few $1,000s more, but I don't want to make any promises. But from what I understand and what we've been talking with financial aid and scholarships, most everything regarding packages is going to remain the same.
Okay, and then looking a little bit further ahead, those students that are currently juniors that are interested in applying to the University of Kentucky, are there any thoughts of going test optional at this point, or is that a decision that will be made later this year?
So that is a decision that we will probably make later on as we kind of progress into the summer. So nothing definitively has been made at this point, but we just met with a lot of our administrators this week, and they have mentioned that it is a priority to have those discussions regarding our juniors and to see what that looks like going forward. So I have been told pretty much from my top chain of command that we should have a decision made for that by August 1st, which is typically when our application opens. So for juniors, I would just say continue to reach out, monitor, and we will continue to give that information out to you all going forward.
Okay, and then what about students that have not yet taken the ACT exam, or they've taken it and they plan on possibly taking it in the fall? What advice would you have for them, again, looking ahead?
Yeah, so obviously, it's a pretty unprecedented time, like we said. So if you have questions regarding your standardized test, or maybe you're wanting to retake it, but things have changed, just communicate and reach out to us. Especially now, we are trying to be as flexible as we can with testing. Again, I don't know specifically what the policy is going to look like for our juniors who are maybe going to apply, if they're going to be test optional or not. But if you have questions or if there's any difficulties, I think the biggest thing is just to make sure that you reach out to either myself as your admissions recruiter, or you reach out to our admissions office, just so we can kind of be aware of the situation and we can work with you more individually one-on-one.
And I know you've always been very accessible. I know, for a fact, usually we send you an email, usually it comes back, real quick. Now more than ever, you need to communicate, and I guess the students themselves have to communicate with you if they do have questions, because obviously this is your job. This is what you do. And some of our students seem to be a little apprehensive. Do they really want to talk to me? Well, yes, that's exactly what they want to do, is, be able to, you want them to talk to you so you can get that information to them and get the correct information. So if you can sort of elaborate a little bit on that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so especially, I don't know what everyone's situation is, but as recruiters, we're all working from home. So a big part of, our new responsibilities is finding new ways to engage with you guys, since we obviously cannot travel to our area. So I can't travel to, Cleveland or the Ohio region to see students or families. So I'm really having to think and be re-engaging with how I interact with you all. So with that being said, I have a lot of different platforms that I can meet you all through. So for example, I'll kind of give you my big 3 items, I would say. So the first one is I have a Calendly account. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but it's basically a website where you can host different meetings and things as such through there. So I have a calendar that's synced up with all of my appointments and meetings. So when you go to my Calendly page, you can see when I'm available, and then obviously you can pick an appointment that's best time for you all, and I will get a notification that you scheduled that appointment. And typically with that, we can either do a phone call, or we can do my second option, which is a Zoom meeting. So Zoom, as I'm sure you all see, is getting kind of a big rep nowadays, especially for being a popular platform to have online meetings and discussions. So we use it at the University of Kentucky, and so now I have my own personal account. If you all would like to do a Zoom meeting, and with Zoom, kind of similar to what we're on right now, it allows you to kind of have a more interactive experience. So in addition to, obviously having a phone call, but with this, I could, share my screen. I could direct you to certain websites. We can kind of get some more definitive answers right there and then, because I'm able to pull up different information as opposed to talking on the phone. So that's another big one. And another big item that we have is Salesforce Chat. So on our admissions page, if you go to uky.edu/admissions, or if you just type uky.edu and search in the search bar for our admissions page, we should have a kind of like a ticket box almost in the bottom left-hand corner that says chat with us. It'll be highlighted blue. And it might not be specifically me, but one of our admissions counselors or recruiters will be on that chat platform talking to you all. So if you have any kind of nitty-gritty questions that you want answered right there and then, you can go click that box. They'll get a notification that you want to request to chat with them, and they'll respond right back, and then they'll be able to answer any kind of upfront questions you might have as well. So those are the big three ones right now. I do have a Google Voice phone number, so if you all do have questions about that, I can leave that with you all, and you can call me with any questions that you have. But those are kind of the big ones. So just again, re-emphasizing the fact that I want to be engaged with you all. I want you all to ask questions. I want you all to feel comfortable knowing you can talk to me if you have any concerns that you want to address.
And again, I just hats off to you because you've always been very responsive, to our office, and we really appreciate it. Taking a step back a little bit with regard to the test optional, and I don't want to get too thick in the weeds here, but any thought on how merit scholarships would be addressed at that point? Let's say you do go test optional. What kind of effect will that have on the different levels of scholarships?
That is a great question. One that I was contemplating myself when we were meeting with our administrators. And for right now, it's going to be difficult because with our academic scholarships, especially, a big part of, how we award our academic scholarships is that it's based on your GPA and your test score. And if we do away with the test score, we would still have your GPA requirement. It's just that, not to get too much into the nitty-gritty, but obviously being a state university, we're allotted a certain amount of funds from our state government, and part of that goes into scholarship giving. So we only have, a certain amount per year for different scholarships and things like that. And obviously raising money from different donors and alumni. So it all kind of plays into one. So with that being said, depending on if we switch to requiring just a GPA, depending on how many scholarships that would now open up, it's going to have to depend. So the summary answer is that I couldn't really tell you right now what that's going to look like. I would just imagine that if it's going to be test optional and we have more of a GPA requirement, we'll have to kind of monitor to see what that looks like, because again, being a state university, we only have certain allotted funds for different scholarships and things of that nature. So we'll just have to monitor that closely.
Okay, because the other thing that obviously has come up throughout this whole event is, pass fail. Some high schools are going to pass fail. And I guess the question is, how do you look at a student that has more of a traditional, ABC grading scale versus those that would have a pass fail? How is that going to enter into the equation?
Yeah, and that's something that we discussed earlier this week with our administration team. So from what I understand, especially on your transcript, if there is, a semester, maybe this semester, for instance, where students are taking classes pass-fail, from what I understand, it's not really going to hinder the student's application because, again, given the circumstances of where we're at, especially with online transitioning and things like that, we'll be a little bit more flexible with that. Now, I would say traditionally, if we have students that are on a more traditional scale versus pass-fail, it often depends. We will probably lean more towards the traditional scale. But again, because we're kind of in this flexible time, especially if students are beginning to take more pass-fail, we're going to recognize that, and we'll be a lot more flexible in kind of factoring what does the GPA look like, what does that then look like for scholarships. So we'll kind of address that as we go case by case.
Okay, and then for those families that have not been able to visit your beautiful campus, I'm assuming, with the on-campus visits kind of being put on hold, you probably have some kind of virtual tours. Do you want to kind of tell the families where they can go to see the virtual tours, where the links are, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so we do have virtual tours. So this is a virtual tour that you can look up at any time. It's not a specific appointment that you'd register for. So if you ever want to check those out, you just go to our Visitor Center webpage, and that's uky.edu/visitor center. And that's our homepage for checking tours out. Now, we also have Zoom admissions presentations going on through there. So similar to what you would do for a regular campus tour, if you're coming to visit, we give about a 30-minute info session prior to you dismissing for tours, and then you actually do your 90-minute tour. But you can do the virtual tour anytime, but then you can also register for one of our online admissions presentations, and that's given by our Associate Director, Grace Johnson, at the Visitor Center. and she'll go through what we normally go through with people who are in-person visits. And if you all have questions, again, you can ask those, type them in the chat box. But essentially, that's kind of what we're adjusting to right now.
Okay. And then based on our meetings that we've had at our office, I know you've mentioned a little bit about super scoring, and correct me if I'm wrong, but last time you were in our office, I remember they use super scoring for acceptance, but not for the merit scholarships. You know, the 25 ACT is a hard number. But again, correct me if I'm wrong. How does UK address the super score?
Yeah, so when it comes to super scoring, as I've even learned myself from kind of over the past few months, how we address it. So super scoring, officially, we do not do, and I will take blame for that. I think that was something that I was under the impression of. But for scholarships, yes, our scholarships has always been the same. We will use your single best test score for scholarship consideration, whether that's ACT or SAT. So the big thing with super scoring is that as opposed to, you know, taking all your different scores and combining them into one big super score, we more specifically look at your sub scores, because in the state of Kentucky, we have what are called college readiness benchmarks. And those are kind of set by the Kentucky Department of Education. And essentially, it allows universities across the state to assess whether or not a student is going to be college ready. And we kind of factor that in based on your test score. So for example, in the state of Kentucky, in order to what we kind of evaluate being college ready, would need to have at least an 18 in English on your ACT, a 19 in math, or a 20 in reading, or the equivalent for the SATs. I always forget what those numbers are, and I apologize. But so when we're looking at your application, if students oftentimes meet all three of those benchmarks and they have a pretty solid GPA, I mean, 2.5 and above, more often they'll already be admitted to UK. Now, if they fall below perhaps maybe one or two of those benchmarks, then that's when we kind of start reviewing as a case-by-case basis, depending on what that benchmark is. But that's essentially kind of where we look at the test score when it comes to admission. So essentially, we're not, you know, combining to give you one big super score. We're just specifically looking at your best sub scores for each exam, if that makes sense.
Yes, and then based on what you said, and I don't remember exactly what ACT, they have that little purple bar for each category. Do you know, is that about the same as Kentucky? Based on what you said, it sounded like it is about the same as Kentucky, or you really don't know what ACT provides students when they get the results back from the ACT?
Say that one more time. So as far as the purple bar for
when you get an ACT test back, the results, the ACT actually provides college readiness marks. In other words, there's like a purple line that goes across English, math, reading, and science, and you can kind of see quickly, visually, where you are. And I'm just curious if you follow the same guidelines as the ACT, or does Kentucky have their own and they may or may not be the same?
So I don't specifically 100% know. I think they're pretty comparable, but I know for ours with the 18, 19, 20, they are specific to Kentucky itself. So
Okay.
It may not be similar to what ACT provides as college ready, but for us in the state of Kentucky, that's just what we have for our state.
Okay. And then based on what you've said already, looking at summer programs like your summer STEM camp for women, I'm assuming, again, decisions are being made. It's very fluid. Is there anything looking at the summer programs that has changed, or at this point, everything is a status quo, waiting to see, you know, what may happen the next, you know, few weeks?
Yeah. So again, I feel pretty comfortable telling you all this, but pretty much what's going to happen is that most of our summer events are either going to be postponed, not happening, or we're going to do it virtual. So I know, especially for UK, we do a lot of athletic camps in the summer. From what we understand, those are all now being canceled at the moment until we find additional options. And the same would go for, again, any other STEM programs, camps, things of that nature. And then obviously with, like I said, orientation, we're going to be transitioning those to online because obviously we need to have those for incoming freshmen. So as far as specific programs, I'm sure the leaders and the administrators in those are going to have discussions on if we do a virtual option or if we just postpone it to a different month. But pretty much any on-campus event that's going to be happening through the summer is not going to happen in person. It will be some virtual option, or we'll await to hear if they're going to postpone it.
Okay. And then with campus tours being right now on hold, as an admissions person, you kind of mentioned that the student should feel free to reach out to you. Is there any other way that they should sort of make their presence known to you as an admissions person at the University of Kentucky?
Yeah, so obviously, if you can tell, I'm a pretty chatty Cathy. I don't mind talking. So you can always say hi, say a quick hello. I'm happy to help. But also, we host a lot of events virtually. So if we're maybe hosting a panel one night where we have current students for y'all to talk to and you happen to show up and join, for me, that's going to stick in my brain because in my mind, you're taking the initiative to actually come to this event, meet with us, talk. So I can already tell that you are really interested in the University of Kentucky. Sometimes I send out surveys to students just to kind of gauge what they're interested in or get any kind of feedback. And if students fill those out, again, that tells me you're initiative and you're engaged. So especially now that everything's going to be virtual, since we really can't have a lot of in-person things, outreach from you guys and also just attending different events or things that we're offering for you all is going to kind of be the biggest indicator of, what's going to make me stand out or what's going to help me remember you, things of that nature.
Okay. And then if we can you're going down this path and I might as well keep taking you down there, but as an admissions person, I know you guys always talk about the holistic view. And, it's nice to have a high GPA. It's nice to have ACT scores. But as an admissions counselor, what do you consider? What do you think is the most important aspect of an applicant? Is it demonstrated interest? And again, we all want to have a 4.0 and a 33 on the ACT. But talk in general, what type of student makes you the best candidate with your experience?
Yeah, and honestly, for you all, what makes a great candidate? It's always going to factor by person, but for me, I think it's just a person who's well-rounded. I mean, while we love having students who are high academic achieving and they may have that great 4.0 GPA or above a 30 ACT or 1400 SAT, that's great. But if you're rarely involved in any organizations or clubs or don't have any kind of outside experience other than your academics, well, especially for some of our scholarships, that's not going to make you really stand out. Yes, you're going to be a great addition to the university, and I know you're going to contribute in different ways. But as far as someone who I think is a great candidate, I want to see that you are involved with extracurricular activity, that you have leadership experience, awards or recognitions that you may have received. Some students, especially for certain programs that they're interested in, they'll already do proactive steps outside of the college level. So for example, nursing is a big one where students are interested. Sometimes people will get their CNA, their certified nursing assistant certificate. They might do shadowing. They might have already done research, especially a lot of those big things. Those are really going to help stand you all out when you're applying or you're applying for any kind of scholarship program. Yes, we will have academic scholarships, which are pretty straightforward. As long as you have the test score and the GPA, you'll receive that if you apply by our December 1st deadline, which is early action. But for any of those high level ones, they're going to make sure that you are really engaged in everything outside of the classroom.
Okay, and then what about the essays? Obviously, you're on the Common App, so we have the 7 prompts. You also, in the past, have had a supplemental essay. If I remember last year's correctly, it was talk about a time that you have struggled. Explain what you had done during that period and what the outcome was. Talk a little bit about the essays and what you look for specifically with an applicant.
Yeah, so with essays, for us at University of Kentucky, we have mainly 2. Now, depending on if you apply for certain additional programs or things of that nature, there might be additional ones. But for the most part, general application, we have 2. So there's an admissions essay, similar to what Andrew said. Ours last year was basically name a challenge that you've overcome, how you've dealt with it, etc. And then we do have an essay for our competitive scholarships. I will tell you all, the Common App essay question that you all fill out, to be honest, we do not really look at it at all because since we have our own, that's the one that we're going to look at more in depth. Now, sometimes if the essays correlate with each other and students kind of want to double up, that is fine. I would just make sure that it kind of constitutes our question as well and not just you're saving time and money just by duplicating. But with essays especially, for some, that's a really great way for us to see you as an individual. So with that, the biggest thing I always express is individuality and creativity. Because if you have a creative essay, especially for competitive scholarships, that's going to help us stand out. Let me give you a perfect example. Back in the day when we had competitive scholarship essays, and we still do, one of the prompts was, if you could uninvent anything, what would it be and why? And obviously, you can choose a lot of different options from that. You could choose something as controversial as high heels, or you could choose something a little bit more generic as cigarettes or war or things like that. So for example, I couldn't tell you the amount of questions that people would get with like social media, cell phones, cigarettes, uninvented, uninvented, uninvented. And eventually, after reading so many, it kind of all merges into one, and you don't really see it sticking out in your brain. But then if someone, for example, wants to uninvent chopsticks, and they kind of give a funny reason why, think, oh my gosh, that's kind of creative and that's kind of quirky that they thought of that. Things like that are going to help you stand out. But again, even if students don't want to apply for competitive scholarships or they may not qualify, your admissions essay is a really great way for us to just kind of see you as an individual and see how you contribute overall to the campus organization and the climate.
Okay. And you mentioned the main essay for the Common App you really don't look at. What about that secondary one that kind of fills in the blanks, if you would, with the activities page? Is there anything more that you want to tell us about you? Do you look at that essay much, or no, not really?
So the tricky part is that, so for me personally, I do not actually look at your all's application first off. So in the office, we have what are called admissions officers, and they are the frontline people that will read your application. Just as with a large university, we get over 20,000 applications every year typically. And so sometimes, it's not quite as feasible for us with travel and things of that nature to also sit down and review the applications. So for the most part, it's going to depend on the officer if they want to read it. But for the most part, from what I understand, oftentimes we're just going to look solely at our admissions essay, as well as if students apply for that competitive scholarship.
Okay.
Sometimes, depending on the situation, like for example, how I mentioned with the college readiness benchmarks, if we see that students perhaps are maybe benchmark or they're kind of borderline being admitted or not, sometimes we'll use those additional essays off the Common App just for us to kind of reevaluate the student. But oftentimes, if we see that they have the academics down and they have the strong essay for admissions, oftentimes that's all we will generally need to look at to admit them into the university.
Okay. And then you obviously have talked to a lot of students, and this comes from our chat, but and maybe you've been asked this, maybe you haven't. With the constant rising student debt number, how would you respond to somebody that's considering trade school or the more traditional four-year degree with cost and benefit? How would you respond that why would, somewhere like the University of Kentucky be more preferable than a trade school, in your opinion?
Yeah, and so I think that's a great question. So the biggest thing that I want students and families to kind of take away from is that for me, there's not one right option as far as where you want to go, whether that's a technical college, vocational school, trade school, four-year, whatever option you think is best for you, I'm ultimately going to support. Now, of course, I could always highlight, the differences between some trade schools and a university. Obviously, with a university like UK, you have a wide set of majors, you have a wide set of different opportunities when it comes to things like internships, clinicals, research. So a lot of your high-level academic things kind of are what different. But at the same time, students might not be wanting to go into those professions. They might want to go into trade school or vocational, and that is totally okay as well. And yeah, kind of Andrew, as you said, especially as tuition keeps increasing, student room and board keeps increasing, sometimes students are now looking at more of a two-year school and then transitioning into their last 2 years at a four-year university. That's a pretty common process here at UK because we have, in the state of Kentucky, we have a community and technical college system that we have a different array of locations in the state, one being in Lexington. So sometimes students will start out at our Bluegrass Community and Technical College, and then they'll transfer into their last 2 years at UK. And that's a pretty common process as well. It'll save you some money, but also it saves you a little bit of time having your BA, your associate's degree already. But yeah, for me, I personally do not have a preference. I just know that obviously if you're looking at what's different, obviously there are some high level differences when it comes to academics or involvement. Obviously at things like trade school, you don't have as much of a student organization involvement or campus climate, things of that nature. So if you're wanting to kind of experience that, you might have to consider options there. But as far as your end goal, or where you want to go, you can get anywhere you want, I think, as long as you have the mindset to do it. But we are just here kind of as a guide to kind of find the best fit for you. And obviously, not everyone ends up at UK. As much as I would love to bring all of Cleveland down to the University of Kentucky, because I think it's wonderful, I know it's not feasible and it's not as manageable. So I'm just here to help kind of see what is the right fit for you.
Okay, and then with regard to students that are interested in the engineering program, I believe you have like a Discover engineering class, I believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say somebody wants to get into engineering, but they're just not sure what path they want to take. It might be industrial engineering, it might be mechanical engineering. What typically does Kentucky do to help that student kind of find their way, so to speak?
Sure. So I think another great step we've taken to make sure that we are helping out our students as much as possible is we have what's called an exploratory or undecided option in a lot of our academic programs. So this is a great way for you all as students to kind of get a glimpse or a taste of a specific program without having to fully commit to it. So for example, with engineering, if you decide, well, I think engineering is a great route, but I maybe just don't know what yet, you can go undecided or exploratory. And in your first year of classes, you will basically take a couple introductory courses, as with many colleges that they offer. And it allows you to get a glimpse of what that field will look like, the different requirements, programs, things of that nature. And then usually by the end of your freshman year, your advisor that is working with you will kind of reassess and touch base to see like, okay, Jacob, what are you thinking about engineering? Is it a great fit? Are you thinking about something else? Do you want to transition? So ultimately, they'll make sure that they kind of help you along the way. And a lot of our colleges have that option as well, and not just engineering. So like business, agriculture, arts and sciences, fine arts. A lot of our academic colleges have that undecided or exploratory option for students who want to kind of get a little taste, I would say, of that program before they kind of go fully into it.
Okay, and then typically, a student is attending more of the preliminary courses. They're not getting too deep into the technical aspect. Again, using engineering as an example. So a lot of the earlier courses are going to be taken by most of the students anyway, so they can start in a certain area and still kind of transfer once they get a little bit more familiar with, the difference between, and again, I'm going to use my example I stated before, what's the difference between industrial engineering and, mechanical engineering?
Yeah, and so especially kind of like you said, but especially freshman year, similar to, I think, what you all have with high school, there's going to be core classes that everybody has to take when you graduate. So oftentimes students ask me, well, Jacob, if I'm exploratory, what does that look like my freshman year? Like I said, you'll usually have a couple introductory courses, but they'll also partner those with a lot of your gen ed classes. So you might be taking a Comm 101 class, Introduction to Communication. You might be taking a Psych 100 class for psychology, or you might have a marketing class for mathematics, things of that nature. And oftentimes, yeah, the great thing, especially with engineering being undecided, is that a lot of times our students are already starting in exploratory studies for engineering as part of the program, and they are introduced to all the 9 majors first before they actually choose their specific route. So especially for anyone interested in engineering, if you're not sure what pathway you want to go into, by the end of your freshman year, you'll already kind of have an essence of what each field looks like, and you'll have a greater confidence as far as where you want to go. And similar to what you do with a lot of your other programs in colleges as well. You'll take a couple of courses here and there in different fields, and usually you'll have a little bit of more broader knowledge as far as what pathway you want to go into.
Okay, and then we're all hoping and praying that things get back to normal sooner than later. When they do, because of the pause that we put on campus visits, do you see Kentucky opening up their schedule a little bit more? Offhand, I don't remember how you guys typically do your visits, if it's a morning and an afternoon, but do you see maybe including some additional maybe weekend visits, or again, is that still yet to be decided?
Yeah, so those conversations are happening as we speak. So yeah, typically how we do our visits, for those who are not familiar, we usually do 2 a day, Monday through Friday. But another great benefit that we have is that we, for the past couple of years now, I would say, have been doing what we call Big Blue open houses. So with the open house event, it's basically like an extended visit. So in addition to obviously taking a campus tour and an admissions presentation, we also offer a resource fair where a lot of our academic colleges and student organizations will be involved with. We'll allow you to meet specifically with your departments that you want to learn more about. We offer open house tours of our residence halls. We have financial aid presentations to go a little bit more in depth about scholarships and financial aid. So it's basically an extended way for you all to kind of kill two birds with one stone in essence and be able to kind of take care of everything in one visit. So those dates are kind of being addressed as we speak. I will say we have 2 in August that we are currently planning. Obviously stand by because you never know how long this is going to last, because we did have one in July, but we just moved it to the following month in August. So we have 2 open houses in August. So those are a really great way to kind of visit campus as well, because I know especially for those, they sometimes are on Saturdays or on Fridays, and it allows you to kind of build a 3-day weekend out of it. But yeah, as far as extended weekend visits, we're talking about those. And again, we'll kind of address it as we go throughout the summer, because I think that's when they're going to kind of really ramp up those discussions and make decisions. But for right now, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay. Again, we're going to drift a little bit off of, the COVID-19. Been asked this question numerous times. College Credit Plus versus AP. Is, in your eyes, one better than the other? Are they sort of equal? Obviously AP has been around a lot longer than College Credit Plus. Curious from a standpoint of admissions, how do you look at a student that, let's say, takes just a normal high school rigor, let's say a college prep rigor, versus ones that take it a little bit step further with honors, AP, and College Credit Plus? And even within that framework of AP, honors, and College Credit Plus, how do you sort of look at different students in the sense that, they took an AP class versus a College Credit Plus? Just, again, general discussion on, let's say, again, College Credit Plus versus AP.
Sure, great question. So kind of starting off with just some high level. So obviously when it comes to looking at your application, and we talk about that holistic process, one of the ways that we look at your application is making sure that you are challenging yourself with rigorous coursework. So that does involve things like honors classes, AP classes, or IB, or CCP. So with that being said, students that oftentimes are taking those classes over someone who might not be, they're automatically already going to stand out a little bit more as opposed to someone who's not. Now, the biggest thing that I always tell families and students is that while we want you to challenge yourself, we don't want you to overwhelm yourself at the same time. So sometimes students, they hear that, AP classes, IB, or CCP are the way to go, and then they think, well, I'll take 6 AP classes my junior or senior year. And then you see it shows in their academics that they struggle, and then they fall behind and they hurt themselves even more. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to be able to manage yourself and you be comfortable in knowing what you're doing. So if you want to challenge yourself, go for it, but at the same time, know your own weaknesses. And, for me in high school, that's one thing I wish I would have done more, is challenge myself. I took a couple AP classes, but I didn't really push myself that much. But, if you think, okay, junior year, I want to take 3 AP classes, or senior year, I want to take 3 or 4, and I think that's going to be good, then that's great. And that's going to make you stand out as well. Now, when you want to get into the weeds of AP versus CCP, I think it's interesting because I think we're starting to see a shift in attitudes towards CCP. I think we are now kind of bringing that up to the level of AP, because I will even say, in my own opinion, I think back in the day, we kind of had AP classes as kind of the pinnacle of students challenging themselves. But I think we're beginning to recognize that if students are taking the initiative to take CCP courses or any kind of dual credit and kind of keep that accelerated time track, I think that also deserves to be highly recognized. So we're kind of almost even as far as CCP and AP. So there's not really going to be one that we look at more than the other. Ultimately, as far as what matters for you all is, are you wanting to take AP classes, which are going to usually count more towards your general education courses, or are you wanting to make a little bit more of a accelerated track and take all these CCP courses that could count for your classes for your major or things like that? So ultimately, I think that decision is going to come down to you guys as far as what you want to kind of accredit towards. But as far as on our end, as far as how we see students pushing themselves or challenging themselves, I think especially now we're gearing towards where I think AP classes and CCP are going to be kind of heavily weighed on the same scale.
And then in so much as Kentucky for us is considered out of state, sometimes you have to go through some additional hoops. A public university such as Miami, they're generally transfer the College Credit Plus fairly seamlessly. How does that operation occur with an out-of-state school such as Kentucky?
Sure. So on our admissions page, again, if you go to uky.edu, if you search for transfer equivalency guide or transfer equivalency, it'll bring up that web page, and on that page, you will be able to find a transfer equivalency form where you can look up what class you are currently taking at your local college or institution, and you can see what that will equate to down at UK. And for the most part, when it comes to CCP, as long as the class comes from an accredited institution, it should transfer over pretty easily without any hassle. Now, oftentimes, you might look on that guide and you might see that your class that you're taking is not on there, but that does not mean we won't accept it. It's probably just the first time that we've ever taken a class from that institution. And if that's the case, we recommend that you just reach out to our transfer advising team. Again, they're all affiliated under our admissions tab and our admissions contacts, but you can find your transfer advisor and you can simply send an email and say, hello, my name is Jacob. I'm taking this class at John Carroll or something that's kind of equivalent up there. And I just wanted to make sure that it would equate to UK's classes. And all they really have to do is on the back end, they'll reach out to the department or program that you're looking at, and they'll basically reach out to a couple of the faculty advisors and basically say, hey, is this going to transfer or is this accredited? And that usually takes, no more than a day, a couple days, and they will get back to you and say, yes, which oftentimes is the response, or in some rare cases, no, it's not going to be the equivalent.
Okay. All right. This has been very informative. You've done a very good job of explaining a lot of the questions that, we get. And I'm hoping that they're getting as much benefit out of this as we are. We're going to open it up to the chat. So if anyone wants to ask a question, just go ahead and hold down your space bar. But before we do that, I guess, Jacob, is there anything more that you would want to add to the discussion? Again, we've covered a lot of topics and you've given us a lot of good information. Is there just anything else that you would want to add before we open it up to Q&A?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, similar to what our supervisors tell us, is just flexibility is going to be important as we go through these next few months. I wish I could tell you, similar to what all of our health professionals are telling you, I wish I could tell you what, 2 months down the road is going to look like, but I honestly do not know. But I will say, we are doing our best to communicate with all of our stakeholders and our families to make sure that you guys get the most prevalent and up-to-date information. And I will try to communicate that with y'all as well and be as transparent. But just knowing that flexibility is going to be a really big key as we go, especially for juniors going into the fall. Just making sure that you're being willing to work with us, and we're going to work with you to make sure that we get everything we need to.
Okay, good. Okay, we're going to open up to Q&A. If anyone has a question, just go ahead and hold down your space bar, ask the question, and then if you can, let it go. Or if you don't feel comfortable with asking a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. Some people have already done that. So if there's anything else that you guys want to get the answer from Jacob, please let us know at this time. Okay, I guess we've covered everything. Again, Jacob, Jake and I cannot thank you enough for the time. Very good information. I think the key from what I've gotten out of this whole discussion is communication is important. I mean, it's important in our business, reaching out to our families, but in the same regard, it's just as important for them to reach out to the admissions office and to just, get the question asked. And then, again, you've been always very responsive, and I'm also aware of if you, do not have the answer to the question, you're going to find the right source for it. So again, very helpful, very beneficial. We appreciate your time. Can't wait for you to see you back up here in Cleveland. Love to have you back up. I think last time you were here in October, so hopefully we'll see you again, in October. And, again, be safe, stay active, and be positive.
Yeah, same goes to you all. Again, thank you, Andrew and Jackie, for having me. Always a pleasure to see you guys. Students, families, thank you all for taking the time to meet with me. Hopefully you got a little bit more of my personality. It's a little bit out there if you can't tell. But again, I'm here to help you guys, so feel free to reach out. But yeah, you all stay healthy, stay safe too, and just let me know how I can ever be of assistance, okay?
All right, thank you. And then we're going to throw your slide back up there, so if anyone wants to reach out to you, there's your email address. It's Jacob Westover at uky.edu. And again, Jacob is very accessible, so if you do have any questions, we just saw him last February, which was, I guess, just a couple of months ago. It seems like forever. At the Cleveland College Fair. So Jacob is always around. I know you're in different high school, high schools as well. So again, we appreciate your time, and thank you again for all the good information.
Yeah.